There's a moment that happens early on, sometimes in the very first conversation, sometimes over the first few weeks, that quietly changes everything. Most people don't notice it when it passes. There's no signal, no announcement. But once it's gone, the direction is already set. What makes this moment so critical isn't what happens during it, it's what doesn't happen. And the absence of this one shift is why some connections feel exciting, full of possibility, while others slowly drift into something comfortable, familiar, and ultimately safe. If you've ever felt like someone saw you as reliable, trustworthy, even important, but never quite the person they wanted, this is usually where it started. So let's talk about what that moment actually is. Most people believe attraction builds gradually, that if you show up consistently, listen well, and prove your value over time, the other person will eventually see you differently. And sometimes that's true, but in many cases, there's a timing element that gets missed entirely. Attraction isn't just about what you offer, it's about when the other person realizes they could lose you. That realization doesn't come from being told. It doesn't come from explaining your worth or listing your qualities. It comes from a feeling, an internal shift, where they sense that access to you isn't guaranteed. That you exist in a world bigger than just them. And when that realization never happens, the dynamic defaults into something else. Not necessarily friendship, but a kind of holding pattern, where they feel safe, unburdened, free to explore other options, while you remain consistently present. This isn't about manipulation, it's about presence. Specifically, the kind of presence that shows you have your own life, your own direction, your own standards. When that presence is missing, the relationship starts revolving around them, their needs, their timeline, their emotional availability. And you become the one who fits into that, not the one they rearrange their life to be close to. Here's what usually happens early on. There's an opportunity to establish a certain kind of boundary. Not a wall, but a shape. A clear sense of who you are, what you value, and how you move through your life. But most people, in an effort to build connection, do the opposite. They become easy to understand, predictable, always available. They prioritize the other person's comfort over their own complexity. And in doing that, they remove the very thing that creates tension, the unknown. And tension isn't discomfort. It's the space between certainty and curiosity. It's what makes someone think about you when you're not around. It's what turns a simple interaction into something that lingers. But when you collapse that space too early, by being overly available, overly accommodating, too quick to please, the curiosity fades. They stop wondering. They feel like they've already figured you out. And once that happens, attraction often fades with it. This doesn't mean you should be distant or cold. It means you maintain a life that exists independently of their attention. You show up fully when you're present, but you don't structure your entire world around them. Because if they sense your life revolves around them before they've invested anything, they'll treat it that way. Not out of cruelty, but out of human nature. People value what they work for. They protect what they feel they could lose. There's a pattern that shows up when this boundary isn't set. They start treating you like a constant, someone who always responds, always makes time, always understands when they cancel or reschedule. And at first, it can feel like closeness. Like trust. Like you're the one they can relax around. But underneath that, something else is forming. A belief that you'll always be there. That their access to you is unconditional. That no matter how they show up, or don't, you'll stay. And that's where the friend zone really begins. Not because they see you as just a friend, but because they see you as safe. As someone who won't create consequences. As someone they don't have to choose, because you've already chosen them. Once that belief sets in, it's incredibly hard to reverse. Because any shift in your behavior later feels like a change. Like you're pulling away or playing games. But the truth is, you were never playing games, you just gave away your position too early. The moment we're talking about happens before all of that. It's when they're still deciding how to see you. When nothing is defined yet, and both of you are quietly figuring out what this could become. During that window, they're paying attention to subtle things. Not just what you say, but how you live. How you respond to their attention. How much space you take up. Whether you seem like someone who needs them, or someone who simply enjoys them. If you have your own plans, your own rhythm, your own priorities, and you show that through your actions, they start to wonder where they fit into your life. And that wondering, that's what keeps attraction alive. But if you rearrange everything for them right away, if you drop plans the second they reach out, if your schedule becomes a reflection of their availability, then there's nothing left to wonder about. You're available, you're waiting, you're already invested, and once they know that, the urgency disappears. Here's what this looks like in real life. They suggest meeting on a night you already have plans. Instead of canceling, you mention your plans, casually, and suggest another time. Not as a tactic, just as the truth. It shows that your life doesn't stop for them, and it signals that being with you requires mutual effort. They text you randomly, expecting an instant reply. You respond when it actually fits your life. Sometimes quickly, sometimes later, because you're genuinely engaged in your own world. They mention someone else they're interested in. You stay calm. You don't compete. You don't try to prove you're the better option. You stay grounded, and you let them decide. None of this is about withholding. It's about not collapsing. It's about holding your shape, even when it would be easier to bend. Because if you bend too easily, they learn they don't have to choose. They learn they can keep you around without committing. And once that pattern sets in, it's almost impossible to undo. What's interesting is that people who naturally avoid this mistake aren't necessarily more attractive or more confident. They just have a different relationship with their time and energy. They don't see being wanted as the goal. They see mutual investment as the baseline. And when that investment isn't there, they don't try to compensate. They simply step back. That's not coldness. It's clarity. It's understanding that attraction isn't created by being more available. It's preserved by staying grounded in who you are. And when you do that, something shifts. The other person starts noticing your absence. They start feeling the difference between when you're there and when you're not. They begin to realize that access to you isn't automatic, that it's something they have to show up for. And that realization, that they could lose you, is what changes everything. Not because you threatened it. Not because you manipulated anything, but because you kept living your life, and they had to decide if they wanted to be part of it. The mistake most people make is believing that showing more interest will create more attraction. That being available will make them indispensable. That proving their value will make the other person see it. But attraction doesn't work that way. It needs a gap, a question that hasn't been fully answered, a sense that there's still something to discover. When you give everything up front, your time, your attention, your emotional availability, you remove that gap. You answer the question before it's even been asked. And once the question is answered, the curiosity fades. That's why the friend zone isn't really about friendship. It's about certainty. They're certain you'll be there. Certain you won't walk away. Certain they don't have to risk anything to keep you around. And as long as that certainty exists, attraction stays dormant. Not because it couldn't exist, but because it doesn't have to. So what does this mean in practice? It means living your life fully, especially in the early stages. Not as a strategy, but as a real expression of who you are. It means keeping plans that matter to you. Being responsive, but not reactive. Showing interest without losing yourself in the process. It means being willing to walk away from something that isn't mutual, even if it feels comfortable. And most importantly, it means understanding that you're not auditioning for someone's affection. You're simply seeing if there's alignment, if there's reciprocity, if there's genuine curiosity on both sides. When you approach it that way, everything changes. Because you're no longer trying to convince them, you're just living your life, and letting them decide if they want to be part of it. And if they don't, that's information. Valuable information that saves you from investing months, or years, into something that was never going to change. That moment, the one where the dynamic gets set, it isn't dramatic. It's quiet. It's choosing to keep your Saturday plans instead of canceling. It's ending a conversation first, instead of always waiting. It's recognizing that you don't need to prove anything, because the right person won't require proof. That's where everything splits. One path leads to being seen as essential, intriguing, someone worth prioritizing. The other leads to being seen as safe, convenient, someone who will always be there. And the difference between those paths isn't how you look or what you say. It's whether you hold your ground, when it would be easier to give in. Understanding this moment doesn't mean you can force it. It doesn't mean you can always fix it after the fact. But it does mean you know what to look for, and more importantly, what to protect, before the direction is already decided. But here's where it gets more complicated. Even when you do hold your ground, even when you maintain that presence, there's still a question that lingers for most people. Is she actually interested, or am I just reading into it? Because the signs aren't always obvious. Most of the time, they're subtle, indirect, easy to miss, especially if you don't trust what you're seeing. And that uncertainty is what keeps people stuck. Not because they're doing something wrong, but because they don't know if the interest is there at all. The next video breaks that down, clearly and practically, the specific behaviors that signal real interest, even when it doesn't feel obvious. Because once you can recognize those signals, the guessing stops. And for the first time, you can actually decide what to do next.